tell you why I joined the Communist Party, because it was really the most important and significant part of my life. And I owe the Communist Party, really, I would say everything. Now, why I joined. Now, the turning point for me took place during the time I was in Iraq during my early 20s. I was sent out to Baghdad as a teacher in an international school. There, I had the opportunity to meet and make friends with Americans who worked in the diplomatic service. The President of the United States of America was John F. Kennedy, and the main international preoccupation was the Vietnam War. I came from a working class background. My father worked for the Great Western Railway as a goods checker in Southall. My mother produced 4 children, and I was the youngest. We were constantly hard up, and I quickly developed working class consciousness. My father was in the Labour Party and taught us to vote Labour, not just for our own good and protection, but because he was convinced intellectually of the benefits and the necessity of a socialist Britain. I have owed much to the Labour Party during my young life. I grew to love the Labour Party, particularly my chance to go to a comprehensive school instead of a local sort of secondary mod, and later to study with the Open University, which was inspired, as you know, by Harold Wilson and the Labour Party. And that was one of the finest things that a Labour government did, was the setting up of the Open University. And it was while I was in Baghdad that I saw by chance a photograph on the front page of the English-speaking press, that is probably the New York Times or the Guardian or the Times. I saw a photograph on the front page showing small children, their flesh being burned by napalm, running, screaming along a road flanked by vegetation destroyed by Agent Orange. I was horrified, and the photograph appeared in newspapers throughout the world and caused a horrified response. It so happened that I got the chance to go to a public meeting. This was a public meeting in Baghdad's American embassy, where I listened very closely to a description of the wonderful work that the American army was doing in Vietnam. And the speaker was the CIA representative and the minister of the Baptist Church. He did both jobs. And I questioned him as to why this was allowed to happen, this awful cruelty administered so heartlessly on these children who were obviously in terrible torment. And his reply, and I shall never forget it, was, "Communism is so evil that the end justifies the means." And that's all he said. And I knew at that point that I was a communist, whatever a communist was. On returning to Britain, I told my father that I wanted to be politically committed and active in the Labour Party. It did not occur to me at that time that I should be in the Communist Party, because I was frightened, like many people of my generation, of the Cold War propaganda. One never mentioned communism. I never knew a communist. They were people who I'd never met up with at all, even though I was in the working class. I knew also that traditionally in Britain, the Labour Party was the party of the working class. It was acceptable as such. But to my surprise, my father urged me to join the Communist Party instead, because after many, many years of being in the Labour Party, he had seen the tendency of the Labour Party to turn to the right and disappoint the aspirations of the trade unions and working class. The leader of the Labour Party at the time was Hugh Gaitskell, and my father was terribly disappointed as he saw Gaitskell turning Labour to the right. I joined the Communist Party, and I was introduced to Marx, Engels and Lenin, and of course, the British Road to Socialism, as it was then called. And of course, the Daily Worker, which I started to read for the very first time. And when I did so, I was hooked to be a communist forever. I regularly attended my Communist Party meetings in Haze, Haze being in Middlesex, because there are two Haze, and this one was the one near Southall. And it was although many people might not know it now, at that time it's a very, very important place, because it was near to London Airport, and it was near to many factories that had grown up along the railway line and the Grand Union Canal out from London to Reading. So it provided lots of work. There were, it was a place of full employment, and where there were lots of people doing very important work too. I joined the Communist Party, and we met in one another's houses, because there was nowhere where we could all meet together without paying a great deal of money for a venue. When I was elected onto the West Middlesex District Committee of the party, I noticed that the party at that time, which some people might find unusual now, that the actual premises was the luxury of a large Victorian house in Southall, which was the Communist Party office, and where the district committee had their meetings. And it was a place of meetings for all sorts of activities that went on in the Communist Party. And it was there that I grew to know the Indian Workers Association, and was able to cooperate with them on matters of anti-racism. And there was a lot of it about racism in that area of Southall and even Haze, but Southall particularly. The National Front was busy in Southall, and the demonstrations were violent. I had seen skinheads in the National Front banging on people's doors in the streets, yelling for blacks to come out so that they could attack them. Our local pub, the Alhambra, was burnt down, and Asian citizens were attacked in their homes and on the streets. I myself was on the demonstration where Blair Peach was murdered. He was a teacher like myself, and I was caught up in the women's liberation movement. But my particular concern in that movement was for equal pay and equal job opportunities. As such, I was invited to talk at factory branches at EMI, that's Electrical Musical Industries, a very big firm, one of the big 5 in the country. And I went along to talk at factory branches in order to help people understand the nature of women's subjection and their role in the important activities regarding the part being played by women in the whole of the working class movement. And I also went along to Heathrow Airport, where there was a factory branch there. When I became head of English at a large comprehensive school in Harrow, I accepted the position at the same time of being representative of my school's branch of the National Union of Teachers, where I helped to campaign on pay and conditions. I was asked by the Communist Party to serve on the National Women's Executive, which meant going to London for meetings. And those were important and exciting times. And I remember meeting up with wonderful women, notably Mary Davis at the time, and listening to her talk. And I learned a lot from her. I was privileged to be chosen to accompany a Morning Star delegation to Romania just after the earthquake there. And I was impressed by the cooperation of the people to rebuild their towns and cities. And it was a chance to see socialist unity at work. At 81 years of age, I still attend my party branch and will continue to do so. Street work I find rather difficult now. I think I'm too nervous to confront the public, and that upsets me that I'm like that. I think it arose out of my efforts at the time of the invasion of Iraq. I was living in Norfolk at that time, and the army bases, military bases in Norfolk meant that I got confronted in the streets and was a victim of a lot of verbal abuse. However, although I don't now do much street work, I can still type with one finger. So the Morning Star receives the occasional letter from me. A word about the future. The future has to be about socialism. It has to be. And it has to be fought for by the working class, with the Communist Party in the lead. Because the Communist Party has the understanding of how to go forward with Marxism-Leninism as its foundation and guide. Unfortunately, there is no time to lose. Climate change will not wait. There is only one way to save the planet and the people on it. The way is to destroy capitalism. with its greed and exploitation, because it's capitalism, really, that is destroying the planet. So there is only one alternative ahead for anybody who cares about humanity, and that is to join the Communist Party. Thank you.